This is the first step in the renewal or renovation of the aquarium, and we're gearing almost entirely now towards conservation, research and education about Pacific marine life. And we're better place to start than with corals, which underpin the marine ecosystem around the islands. So we're highlighting corals, we're explaining the biology in hopefully simple terms so that people can appreciate the species diversity and the biological complexity of corals around the Hawaiian Islands. I hope they'll understand why corals are so critically important for a wide variety of reasons. And last but not least, we're highlighting some of the world-class research being undertaken on corals here at the University of Hawaii in Manoa.
You know, early in my career, I was extremely lucky. I did all of my PhD research in Jamaica, on the north shore of Jamaica, and was lucky enough to dive on some spectacular reefs. And there was one wall dive that you'd swim across the reef at about 10 or 15 feet, and you'd come to the edge and you'd look down, and it was a solid drop-off like a mountain underwater. And you'd swim over the edge, and you could go indefinitely, frankly. And there were these massive corals growing out of the side of this mountain. It was so beautiful. It was called the Rio Bueno Wall. I went diving there many times, and there was a big development being planned at the mouth of the river that fed into this place. And that entire reef system died as a result of sediments pulled down that river in under 2 weeks. So something that had been there for many thousands of years, eradicated by a very poor set of decisions from ourselves.
A lot of diversity is being lost, and genetic tools can kind of help to make a map of both in time and in space to understand what's rare, where things are from, how things are connected, whether a species is endangered or not, or endemic, whether it's at risk of extinction. And then the cultivation plays an important role, because if we identify corals that are at risk of extinction, then we can learn how to grow them. So corals are extremely plastic. They grow in a lot of different growth forms. So understanding what is an endemic species or understanding what is rare is very challenging. And that's one of the reasons why we use DNA as a tool to understand how things are related. It's kind of like 23andMe or AncestryDNA.com or something like that for corals.
Coral reefs are often called the rainforests of the sea because they are full of the diversity of different kinds of fish and animals. And it's really important to us here in Hawaii because we're surrounded by ocean. We use the ocean for recreation, for subsistence, and it's very important for fishes as well, so that they have protection, so that they have shelter and food, and a number of other invertebrates and other organisms. The early Hawaiians have a creation chant called the Kumulipo, where they realized that the foundation of all life is the coral. The first thing that Kumulipo and Po'ele brought forth was the coral polyp, and then the coral colony. And this coral colony, then from that sprang forth all other life in the ocean and later life on land, showing that the early Hawaiians believed that the coral reef was the vital part of their existence.
The deep sea corals are all found below the depth of light penetration, so they don't have the algal symbionts that the shallow corals do. And so they have to get their food from particles that are falling down through the water column, or by capturing microzooplankton, for example. And we're pretty sure they don't eat very often, which is one of the reasons why they live so long. The average bamboo coral is about 800 years old. Some live to be about 1,500 or 2,000 years. But there's also a black coral that was found right off of Makapu'u, actually, that was age dated at 4,290 years. And that makes it the oldest known living animal. And the only thing older is a pine from the California-Nevada border, the pinyon pine, which most people know about, that lives about 5,000 years. So this animal is quite a long-lived. And we see this species of black coral in many parts of the Pacific and in the Atlantic, so they're quite widespread.
The research question is, what serves our local community better? Is it a contemporary Western management style that is implemented by state and federal agencies? Or in Hawaii, we have an alternative that had 800 years of incredibly successful management of this same place. And a lot of the locals would say that actually that system is better. I think as a scientist, our job is to try and look at the data and to find out what works better. And, you know, I don't think we can blindly take either side and say that's the only way to do it. The climate is changing, society has changed. We don't expect people to give up their monofilament fishing line and their car and their air conditioning. So we have to adapt to that. And the real question, I think, for any management system is, what does it provide to local communities? And asking that question.
A most important and emerging point for people interested in healthy reefs is to begin to try to understand how our changing ocean and our changing climate are going to impact the species diversity, even the species composition. In most cases, the scenarios, as you probably understand, are that the corals will suffer substantially because of increased temperature. But many of our plants are not going to suffer from increased temperature. They may thrive under those conditions. The decrease in pH is tied to an increase in CO2 in our oceans, and that will also likely trigger specific taxa, specific seaweeds to begin to grow more quickly than they had, because carbon is an essential substrate for photosynthesis. It's quite likely, in my worldview, that in 50 years we may have reefs that are dominated by algae. And they may not be the ones that feed the fish that we need to have for our own food security. These are the issues that drive me to want to bring people's focus to not just the coral aspect of healthy reefs, but also the algal aspect of healthy reefs. This interrelationship between these three groups, coral, fish, and algae, is critical. It has to remain balanced, or we may find that we are not able to live on these islands in the way that we want.